It was once the ultimate aspiration. Study hard, move to the United States, earn in dollars and settle for good. For decades, that formula defined the Indian American success story. But in 2026, that dream is facing a serious reality check. A new survey by the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace reveals a striking shift. 4 in 10 Indian Americans are now considering leaving the United States because of a mix of political, economic and social pressures. Interestingly, the most cited reason is frustration with United States politics. The new president's actions have thrown US-India relations into a crisis, rolling what once was hailed as the defining partnership of the 21st century. The survey mentions nearly 6 in 10 respondents. That's 58%. This is followed closely by concerns about the cost of living and personal safety. These are the top reasons why people want to leave. If they did think of leaving the United States, what was the reason? Frustration with US politics. There are more than 5.2 million people of Indian origin residing in the United States. And for most who took part in the survey, political climate is the heart of this change. There is widespread dissatisfaction with the Trump's second term. About 71% of people who answered said they didn't like how he handled the economy, immigration and international relations. Interestingly, while there is some criticism of US-India ties, but foreign policy isn't a big issue for most people. Instead, many people say they are uncomfortable with the tone of domestic politics and what they see as an increasing exclusionary national narrative. For most, the rhetoric that emphasizes America for Americans has made immigrant communities, including Indian Americans, feel less like they belong, with commentators observing a notable rise in online hate speech and discrimination against Indian Americans. A growing sense of discrimination and social unrest is also related to this. While there hasn't been a big rise in direct violence, but people are more worried about everyday bias, especially in workplaces and online. A lot of people said they had changed their behavior, avoided certain conversations, or felt less safe in public. For a community with a lot of first-generation immigrants and non-citizens, the small but constant feeling of discomfort is a big reason why they are thinking about leaving. Indian American dreams are also increasingly intersecting with religious identity, facing rising Hindu phobia and backlash against public displays of faith. Also, Vice President J.D. Vance saying he hoped his Hindu wife Usha Vance would be moved to convert to Christianity, causing backlash and unease. The Indian community is also going through a change in politics. Indian Americans are no longer strongly tied to one party. Since 2020, fewer people have identified as Democrats, while Republican support has stayed mostly the same. About 30% of people now identified as independents, which is a growing number. The question is, which party do Indian Americans support the most? There seems to be a decline for the Democrats from 52% to 46%. For the Republicans, there's been an increase despite what seems to, for many, a very uncomfortable, uneasy environment in United States. From a 15% support for Republicans in 2020, it's now to 19%, almost a 4% hike. This was reflected in 2025 in the crushing defeat of the Republican candidates in 3 elections, New York, Virginia, which even forced MAGA commentators blame anti-India rhetoric of MAGA behind defeat, concluding that Indian Americans have moved away from them. Well, there's another interesting question. Will someone like Mamdani raise Indian Americans' standing? Result in policies beneficial to me, 68% agreed, 32% disagreed. Strengthen the American community's status, 73% said a candidate like Mamdani would be able to do that. When asked whether they think a candidate like Mamdani would be able to strengthen the Hindi communities or the Hindu community's status, 59% said yes. So now the question is whether India can channel the brightest minds to innovate and lead at home. Because if 40% of Indians in US want to leave US, it doesn't necessarily mean they want to return to India. And that's again one of the issues that India must look at. One, if they return to India, does India have it to be able to fuel their talent into a might and a strength, formidable strength for India from India? Or how to really attract them? There's so many more questions at this point. I'm being joined at this point by Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, former Indian diplomat, who should be joining us shortly. Mitali Nikore, who's a founder and chief economist, as well as Adit Kothari, a foreign affairs and geopolitical expert. Ravi Karkara, author, investor, and co-founder, Global Air Water Generation, also joins us. Thank you very much, all three of you, for joining me. Mitali Nikore, let me just ask you first. When we look at this survey, this is very telling. This is very telling. 40% of Indians, 4 in 10, every 4 in 10 Indians in US, they want to exit US. This is unprecedented.
No, absolutely, Sneha. It is, it is unprecedented. And I think the bigger question becomes whether these are Indians, who have gone to the US, say to study, those who were born in India, raised in India, and then went there to study and then want to not extend their stay. Or are these actually, say, second or third generation Indian Americans who have been brought up in the American culture, but still, are finding it hard to assimilate in a new America, which is, judging them by the color of their skin rather than by their values, which may be far more American. So I think that distinction is very critical because, the Indians who have gone the first generation today, they have very different, opportunities when they come back because they have parents here, they have families here, they may have family businesses here, they may have ties to the community here, so it's easy for them to get jobs as well. And one of the major reasons to go to the US for the first generation or for the young Indians is to get a quality education. And after you get that education, the world is your oyster. You can decide that, do you want to continue living in the US? Do you want to move to Europe or the UK? Or do you want to come back to India and, do a job or start a business of your own? So the considerations are very different. But I think if you have been brought up in the US, and of course, I have friends and, colleagues, etc., of both type, of Indian Americans. And I do feel like the ones who have been brought up there, for them, it is much harder because they have always identified with America as their country, but India as a homeland. And they have found it very easy to live both of these lives, and have this dichotomy and the dualism, but they have benefited from it, for their entire life. Now they face that choice, and I'm sure it must be very difficult.
That's true. In fact, Adit Kothari, you are live from London. You are far away from India. What do you make out of this? For a very simple reason, there seems to be a lot of Indians for a very long time have increasingly been supporting Republic. The percentage of Indians who used to support Democrats earlier has shrunk, and it's those who support Republicans that's actually increased. What do you make out of this with the return of Trump 2.0 as it were? There seems to be a growing unease among Indians, both from the Democrats who support the Democrats as well as those who support the Republicans.
So, Sneha, I mean, if you look at the first term of Donald Trump, it created a lot of comfortness for the Indian Americans because the alliance was very strong. There was a huge support for Donald Trump in the first term, and he reciprocated that very well with the Indian Americans there as well. But in his second term, he's become largely insular looking, very inward looking. His policies, his politics is extremely unipolar, where he looks at America from a very sort of a myopic lens rather than, America being this hegemonic global power. And, his responsibility as the leader of the free world has diminished largely that to being just the leader of the America, and that too just of the MAGA belt. But that having said that, the fact that the Indian Americans have come into question and come into question from a very racist and a very bigoted point of view, the
Yeah.
problem isn't the immigration in itself. The problem is the perception of it. A lot of it is because of how the MAGA belt predominantly looks at Americans, sorry, the Indian Americans, because they see them as as people who have come into America and stealing the jobs away. And that, echoes from what Donald Trump put out in his social media as of last night, where he said, Indians are basically gangsters with laptops, which is a very nasty and a very
Absolutely.
bigoted thing to say. But, the reality of the things is very
But let me just
different.
come in. Let me just come in, Adit Kothari, because it almost seems that Donald Trump had to do damage control. Going on to
No, but
say
was it
India,
was it Donald Trump?
I mean, let me just say this, put this in context, because on one hand, he says hellhole, people from India and China and so on, and he retweets the posts of the radio broadcaster for what it is. Extremely unsavory for whatever it is. A president doing that for Indians who have been in US and contributing large scale to what US is today. On the other hand, just within hours, he seems to be, in a way, quote unquote, forced because of the dynamics that are involved to say, India is a country I love, headed by a leader I love. Just the dichotomy of both of these.
I see where you're coming from, but that wasn't coming from Donald Trump. It was more from the White House, which was trying to sort of
Correct.
exercise some sort of a damage control. The right thing for him to have done is, realize what his mistake was and go back to Truth Social and put it out there that, this was, done in a figurative manner, or, was not done in the right, in the right taste. And India is a great friend, so he should have done damage control, which he failed to do. Just looking at it from a factual perspective, Indian Americans are roughly about 1.2, 1.3% of the entire population of the United States. They contribute almost 6% of the taxation towards the American state, which is roughly amounting to about $300 billion a year. That's a lot of money. So Indian Americans are just not immigrants there who are extracting out of the system, but on the contrary, they're the ones who are actually building a new America. And that is something which the Indian American diaspora there in the West needs to sort of advocate as well. They need to put it out in the public domain. So, which is why I think from an Indian American perspective, they need to be having lobbies with both. They need to be talking to both the Democrats and the Republicans, and they need to keep that pressure boiling on both the
Which
mainstream
for a
political
very long
parties.
time has been the culture. The Indian Americans, their diaspora, the bodies that represent them in the United States has been very strong. The dialogue has been very strong, sometimes very sharp. And they have always ensured that they put their stand out in the fore, which is kind of not been the case over the last few months. And I guess that's where also this survey kind of reflects what we are really talking about. If I can, good evening, Dr. Jayant Dasgupta. Thank you so much for joining us. Just give me some time. Let me very quickly go over at this point to Ravi Kakara. A lot of Indians who are in United States, it's not an underhand in the sense that, you don't go there just for your citizenship. You don't go there just for birth tourism. A lot of Indians who are going there are building America with their blood and sweat. But there's also a bigger question. If 40% of Indians do want to leave the US, does it really mean they want to come back to India? That's another question.
Yeah, Sneha, great to be here with all of you. Having been here for about 2 decades, I've seen it from the evolution of 9/11. And I was telling your colleague, I was attacked right after 9/11 in Grand Central. And that time I was mistaken to be a person from Pakistan. 10 years or 12 years since then, I was attacked again in Midtown. But this time I was not attacked because I looked like a Pakistani or a terrorist. This time they said, you Indians are taking away my job. That's about 8, 9 years ago. So it was not Trump. So just to say that this is not happening now, it's becoming worse. But definitely for about 2 decades, I've seen it going up and going down, and probably it's the lowest.
Why is it becoming worse? Do you agree with this survey? Do you agree with the results of this survey?
I have three particular dimensions to it. One is to really look at more from a political rhetoric perspective. And I think the rhetoric has become worse. I think the online hate, the disinformation, the misinformation, the data that is put in and then withdrawn, to really create that kind of a situation where the extreme right, who actually on a day-to-day basis actually really enjoys the work, living together, but the information disinformation is really unacceptable. As Adit said very correctly, the diaspora is almost churning out 300 to 400 million, billion, sorry,
Billion.
every year. And also 1% of the Indian origin diaspora is the strongest when it comes to the very different from Canada, very different from Europe or Southeast Asia or GCC or Gulf countries. It's a very influential diaspora even today. So the fact is that, if you see over the decades, right, from the 50s, where only 5,000 Indian origin folks were here, now it's 5.1 million. That's almost the size of Denmark, right? So you see a very strong influence. From a political perspective, I have seen it. I would not say that, it's only the Republicans. During the COVID time, if you remember, the infamous statement that Biden made, and then the American Physician Association of Indian origin then came up with a very strong statement because about 100,000 Indian origin doctors here said, absolutely unacceptable. We will support India to then come up with its own vaccine. You remember that controversy around, April 20, around April 20,
And
whatever
it
the
often
time was.
finds mention even today.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to say that it's been happening, and really on the point that Mitali said, I think people come back and call you out.
Yeah.
I don't American town or in Wall Street who have called on the street and said, "You are taking away my job." And then some of them attacked. I was almost boxed, right? In Union Square, and I just moved like that and said very clearly, "You are taking away our jobs." Having said that, I think there is also the cultural aspect to it. I would say that the other extreme is that Indian diaspora has never been much more integrated. The Diwali recognition, right? The
Yeah.
fact that you see more and more Indian cultures being integrated into school and education system. So I think that's also another side of the same society. At a societal, cultural level, I think there's much more understanding of India than it was during 9/11. So I see that 25, 26 years of complete increase. And on that note, just an example, like if you know that the Indian diaspora has gone into a neighborhood, you'll see the education and school rating will increase. So that is also another very important fact. And then the real estate market in that particular neighborhood will go up. Those are also important facts to understand that how cultural economic piece really works in. And really on the finance part, we have already talked about it, but you should know that if you look at the startup culture, because I do a lot of work on investment, so I do globally water generation, but
Right.
also form the Invest Forum.
Okay.
On startup, 1 in 10 startups in America, as we speak right now, are from Indian origin, and we know the CEO data. So yes, there are some facts which are great, but I don't see 40% around me saying that, oh, I'm going to leave tomorrow. I don't see that. Indians have been very resilient. Yes, the next generation has a huge question mark. Your question about whether the Indian diaspora will go to India, this generation is very different. They will look at an opportunity from Japan to Germany to Canada to Europe to South
Very
America,
important
many of
point.
them. Yes, so I think that's going to be very, very different. So
That's very
thank you so
important.
much.
So let me just get in Dr. Jayant Dasgupta. Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, to what Mr. Ravi Karkara has spoken, do you really see the collapsing the collapsing great American dream could really be the India moment? Can that happen? Because does India have a sense, a realization of what they're really staring at? It's not just the geopolitics that's changing. Every day it's about how perceptions, jobs, economies are changing, about how increasingly people are feeling unsafe in several countries, including in United States. Can this be India's moment?
Well, there are two ways of looking at this whole thing. One of them, I think, has been dealt with by Mr. Adit Kothari and Mr. Ravi Lavkara. It is about Indians wanting to come back to India, and that is not happening. Except for people who may have a problem with their visas and for staying on for a longer period. The others who are US citizens, let's say, may be wanting to look for better opportunities in other countries, not necessarily in India. There are a few who are coming back to India on a short-term basis because they are getting some kind of an assignment here, which is very productive from their career perspective as well as professionally in terms of money as well. So, having said that, the other point is uh, India's moment meaning what exactly? Because this is something which has been, as Mr. Karkara mentioned, been there for quite some time. This xenophobia, especially when people in the lower rungs of society are not getting jobs, they have a lot of insecurity. They are constantly fighting against inflation, and this has got accentuated with the Gulf War now. This reminds me of something which was there in the UK, a phenomenon called skinheads and Paki bashing, which took place about 50 years ago. It was exactly the same thing. The lower middle class or the poorer people, they were, especially the youth who didn't have jobs or had money looking at it, was called Paki bashing. It is exactly the same that is happening now. The people who accosted Mr. Karkara twice, they would have been from the same, rung of society. So, with this inward looking administration, I think it has been accentuated in President Trump's time. And, you know, uh, he's been pointing fingers at mainly Indians, Chinese, and other outsiders who are supposed to have taken away jobs from the hardworking Midwest American society. So that is something which is not factually correct. There are other structural
Exactly.
reasons why the American economy, especially in the manufacturing sector, has gone down. And with the advent of AI and technological changes, there would be fewer jobs in highly developed societies like the US. And this is only going to get worse, possibly. So let
Exactly.
us acknowledge it for what it is. It is basically xenophobia, and that too, perhaps in the lower strung rungs of society, which are facing the brunt of economic distress.
Right. I think we're totally out of time. A very important conversation. Maybe if I can get 30 seconds from each of you to just get your last remarks, because all of you are, you have so much to share, and so many people in India and abroad are really having these conversations. They want to know how to maneuver this. Adit Kothari, let's just start with you. It's very uncertain geopolitical situation at this time. People are even wondering, should they be moving base at all? Should they just stay put where they are, or should they just return home? And in between all of this, when you see what's happening in the United States, what's happening in, say, Australia or in several other pockets, how do you look at it? 30 seconds, each of you.
Well, I think, when it comes to the mobilization side of things, I think Ambassador Dasgupta touched upon a very important factor, which is the visa sort of things. Like today, if I'm a British citizen, there is no real incentive for me to actually move back to India yet. So those incentives need to be created, and so far those incentives are missing. So maybe we will look at other pastures if the pressure really builds up from the far right or from the Islamists. That has also not happened yet. So we are going to demonstrate spine, and we will continue to fight those systems, whether that be in the United Kingdom or be that in the United States. I mean, the fact that Ravi, despite being attacked twice, has continued to persevere to stay there, demonstrate that there is a lot more that the United States is offering him at this point of time. So I don't think we've come down to that juncture just as yet,
All
Sneha.
right. Ravi Karkara?
Yeah, adding on others' point, I think I don't see Indians moving the residents, but I see one thing for sure that more and more Indian Americans and many American investors are looking at India. We ourselves have a factory now in Chennai, and we're looking at India, US. So I really see, in spite of what the political rhetoric is, the business sector, the corporate sector has a very clear ambition, which is India, US need to work together, and we'll see more of that. But on Ambassador Excellency's point, I really agree. The SaaS-based society, having written a book on AI, it's gone. So if India is expecting to really make sure the software engineers are going to come back, there's no job here. The whole thing is going to be automated, dark factories, and it's going to be totally different from the way the world economy is run. And that's just for not India and America; it's for the whole world. It's going to be
Right.
a very different fifth industrial revolution. Thank
Right.
you.
Mitali Nikore?
So I think the first thing is that I want to condemn the statement that has been made by President Trump yesterday. I think the government of India should also be condemning it in the strongest possible language. And I want to say that as a young person and for the youth of today, the respect accorded to their home country is as important as the destination country. Yes, there are opportunities in the US, but there are opportunities in the UK, there are opportunities in Europe, and there are opportunities in the rest of the world. So I think for a lot of young people, when they are making a choice about where to go, I'm not talking about the ones who are already there, but when you're making a choice of where to go, this is now a very clear factor in your decision. And there are opportunities in Dubai, there are opportunities in Singapore. So honestly, the US will lose out on some of the best global talent if they continue to abuse countries like India and China.
I think important words. Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, your closing remarks.
Two or three things. First,
30 seconds, sir. I don't have more time.
President Trump and MAGA are not going to continue for very long. 2.5 years for President Trump, and MAGA will also go into a decline, hopefully. So it is not doomsday. So Indians should hold firm and take a decision based on purely objective grounds. The second point is that there would be a pushback from US industry itself, the Fortune 500 companies, for instance, which have already been saying so, especially in regard to this H-1B visa $100,000 fee. So there would be this pushback from industry. And the third thing is about building bridges and strengthening our presence there through social interactions. That is the thing which I'm sure the Indians are doing there. Because
Right.
Indians, wherever they go, they don't stick out like a sore thumb. They integrate very well with the local society. So that is a positive for India. So I think it is time for us to just hold on.
Right. Thank you so much, all of you. Dr. Jayant Dasgupta, Mithali Nikore, Adit Kothari, as well as Ravi Karkara. Thank you so much for your time and for your perspectives. We'll have more of these conversations in days to come.